They said I was too old at 53. What they didn't know? I built a system that keeps their company alive. 25 years of loyalty. One nephew with fresh ideas. And the legal bomb I've been sitting on for months. Ever been called a tired old fart by someone half your age? Here's what I did next. The modernization strategy he bragged about? I wrote the original code, every single line. My daughter just started college, my wife's medical bills, and this kid thinks I'm disposable. He fired me on Monday. By Friday, lawyers were calling him. What do you do when loyalty means nothing and experience is a liability? I could destroy them with one email. But should I? The nephew's fresh energy? It just violated 15 federal regulations I helped write. They wanted fresh blood. They got a legal bloodbath instead. My name is Robert Martinez, and this is how I learned that sometimes the best revenge is letting people destroy themselves. It wasn't always like this. 25 years ago, I walked into Peterson Technologies as a junior systems architect, fresh out of Georgia Tech, with dreams bigger than my paycheck. Back then, the company was just 12 people crammed into a converted warehouse, and every line of code mattered. I remember my first all-nighter. We were building the security protocols that would eventually become the backbone of our entire operation. While my wife, Sarah, waited at home with dinner getting cold, I stayed until 2 a.m., debugging encryption algorithms that would protect millions of dollars in client data. Just one more test, I'd tell myself, watching the sun rise through the office windows. By the time I got home, my 6-month-old daughter Emma was already awake, gurgling in her crib. Sarah met me at the door with tired eyes and a forced smile. She missed her daddy, Sarah said, handing Emma to me. We both did. I promised it would get better once the system was stable. That was the first of many promises I'd break in the name of building something lasting. The Peterson Security Suite became our flagship product. Every major corporation in the Southeast trusted our encryption to protect their sensitive data. Insurance companies, banks, government contractors, they all relied on the foundation I'd spent years perfecting. But success came with a price. Emma's first steps happened during a client emergency. Her first words were recorded on Sarah's phone because I was debugging a critical vulnerability that could have cost us everything. How many of us sacrificed family time believing loyalty would be rewarded, I'd think, watching my daughter grow up through weekend glimpses and dinner table catch-ups. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd built a system to protect everyone else's most valuable assets while neglecting my own. Last month, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. A vulnerability in the new authentication module. A backdoor so subtle that most developers would miss it completely. The kind of flaw that could expose every client database to the wrong hands. I could have reported it immediately, but that would mean explaining how the nephew's innovative code changes had created a security nightmare. Instead, I documented everything meticulously, planning to fix it quietly and avoid the inevitable finger-pointing. Mr. Peterson had always valued my judgment. Robert, he'd say during our quarterly reviews, you're the keeper of our digital soul. Without you, we're just another tech company. Those words meant everything to a man who'd spent his prime years building something he believed would outlast him. But last Tuesday, whispers started floating through the office about succession planning. Mr. Peterson's nephew, fresh out of Wharton with an MBA and opinions about everything, was being groomed for leadership. How many times had I seen this movie? The old guard replaced by young blood. Experience dismissed as resistance to change. That night, I sat in Emma's childhood bedroom, now empty since she'd left for freshman year at Duke, and wondered if I'd made the right choices. The walls were covered with ribbons from track meets I'd missed, photos from school plays I'd watched on FaceTime from the office parking lot. Sarah found me there at midnight, staring at a picture of Emma's high school graduation. "She understands, you know," Sarah said softly. "She's proud of what you built." "What if what I built doesn't matter anymore?" I asked. Sarah sat beside me on Emma's old bed. "Then you build something new. But don't let them convince you that your experience is worthless." The next morning brought the official announcement. James Peterson Jr., call him Jimmy, would be taking over daily operations while his uncle transitioned to an advisory role. Jimmy was 28, drove a Tesla, and had spent exactly 18 months in corporate America before his uncle handed him the keys to a $20 million operation. His first company-wide email was a masterpiece of millennial corporate speak. Excited to leverage synergistic solutions and disrupt our legacy workflows to optimize our digital transformation journey. I read it 3 times, trying to decode what he actually planned to do. The answer came during his first innovation meeting, a gathering I wasn't invited to, despite being the architect of every system we used. "We need to move fast and break things," Jimmy announced to the development team. "The old ways of doing business are holding us back." Through the conference room glass, I watched him gesture enthusiastically at a whiteboard covered with buzzwords like agile methodology and cloud-native solutions. My first real conversation with Jimmy happened 2 weeks later. I'd been excluded from the strategic planning sessions, relegated to legacy system maintenance, while the innovation team redesigned our entire infrastructure. "Robert," Jimmy said, approaching my desk with that practiced smile they teach in business school, "I appreciate your historical perspective on our systems, but I think it's time we brought some fresh thinking to the table." "Fresh thinking about security protocols I wrote?" I asked. "Exactly. You've done great work, but technology moves fast. We need people who understand social media integration, mobile-first design, cloud scalability, modern stuff." I bit my tongue. The modern stuff he was describing required the exact same foundational security principles I'd spent decades perfecting. "Jimmy, the Peterson Security Suite processes 40 million transactions daily. One mistake could create opportunities for innovation." He interrupted. "Look, I get it. Change is scary when you've been doing things the same way for 25 years. But trust me, I know what I'm doing." The patronizing tone hit me like a slap. This kid was explaining my own industry to me. "Of course," I said quietly. "I'm sure you do." That night, Sarah noticed my mood immediately. "Rough day?" she asked, finding me staring at my laptop screen in the kitchen. "They're treating me like I'm obsolete," I admitted, "like 25 years of experience is somehow a liability." "Are you?" "What?" "Obsolete." I looked at her, surprised by the directness of the question. "Sarah, I literally wrote the code that keeps that company running. Every security protocol, every backup system, every disaster recovery procedure. It all traces back to architecture I designed." "Then why are you letting a 28-year-old make you feel worthless?" It was a fair question. Why was I? The answer became clear the following week when Jimmy scheduled a performance optimization review with HR present. "Robert, We need to discuss some concerns about your adaptability to our new direction, Jimmy began, sliding a folder across the conference table. Inside were screenshots of emails I'd sent questioning the security implications of his proposed changes, feedback I'd given about rushing deployments without proper testing, suggestions that maybe we should consult with our legal team before implementing certain features. These communications suggest resistance to innovation and change management, the HR representative read from her notes. I prefer to call it professional caution, I replied. Some of these changes could expose us to significant liability. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Jimmy said, leaning forward. You're focused on problems instead of solutions. Our competitors are moving ahead while we're stuck debating hypothetical risks. Hypothetical? I pulled out my own folder, documentation of the security vulnerability I'd discovered. Jimmy, your authentication module has a flaw that could compromise every client database we maintain. Jimmy's face flushed. That's impossible. I tested that code myself. Did you test it against SQL injection attacks, cross-site scripting, man-in-the-middle exploits? Silence. That's what I thought, I said quietly. The HR representative cleared her throat. Mr. Martinez, we appreciate your thorough approach. But moving forward, we need team players who can embrace change rather than create obstacles. I stared at her, realizing this wasn't a performance review. It was a setup. I understand, I said, closing my folder. Crystal clear. Walking back to my desk, I passed the innovation team's workspace. Jimmy was explaining his modernization strategy to a group of younger developers, gesturing excitedly at architectural diagrams that looked suspiciously familiar, because they were mine. Every flowchart, every system interaction, every security checkpoint. He'd taken my designs and rebranded them as his revolutionary vision. That evening, I called my mother for the first time in weeks. "Mijo," she said in her gentle Mexican accent, "you sound tired. Are you taking care of yourself?" "Mama, do you ever wonder if I made the right choices? Working so much, missing so much of Emma's childhood. Robert, you gave your family security. You gave your daughter opportunities I could never give you. But maybe," she paused, "maybe it's time to think about what you want to give yourself." "What do you mean?" "You've spent 25 years building other people's dreams. When do you build your own?" Before I could answer, she continued, "And mijo, if they don't appreciate what you built, maybe it's time to build somewhere else." Her words stuck with me through the weekend. Emma called from college, excited about her engineering courses and full of questions about my career. "Dad, my professor mentioned the Peterson security suite in class today. He said it's like the gold standard for financial encryption. That's so cool that you work there." "Emma, what would you think if I didn't work there anymore?" "Why? Are you getting a better job?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just getting too old for this industry." "Dad, you're 53, not 93. And you're like really smart. Any company would be lucky to have you." The faith in her voice made my chest tight. Here was my daughter, believing in me more than I believed in myself. Monday morning brought another urgent innovation meeting. This time, I wasn't just excluded. I was specifically told to remain at my desk and maintain current systems while the future was being planned. Through the glass wall, I watched Jimmy present his revolutionary new security architecture to Mr. Peterson and the board of directors. My architecture, my decades of work, renamed and repackaged as Jimmy's vision for the future. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not code this time, but documentation. Screenshots of original design documents with my digital signature. Email timestamps showing when I'd first proposed each innovative feature Jimmy was claiming credit for. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. M's tuition bill came today. $15,000 for spring semester. Thank God for your good insurance. The reminder hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't afford to lose this job. Not with Emma's education and Sarah's ongoing medical treatments. The cancer had been caught early, but the follow-up care was expensive, even with insurance. I was trapped, and Jimmy knew it. That afternoon, he stopped by my desk with a printed document. Robert, I need you to sign off on the new authentication protocols. Just a formality, but compliance requires sign-off from the original system architect. I read through the technical specifications, my heart sinking with each page. Every shortcut I'd warned against, every security risk I'd flagged, all packaged into a deployment timeline that gave us zero room for proper testing. Jimmy, implementing this without a full security audit could expose us to what? Success, competitive advantage, market leadership, legal liability, client lawsuits, federal investigations. He laughed, actually laughed at my concerns. Robert, I know change is hard for someone your age, but sometimes you have to trust that the next generation might know something you don't. Someone my age. Have you ever felt invisible in your own workplace? Like your experience suddenly became a burden? The question would haunt me for weeks, because the answer was becoming clearer every day. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me to disappear quietly, without causing problems for their brave new world. I didn't sign the document. That night, I sat in my home office until 3 a.m., researching employment law and age discrimination statutes. What I found made my blood boil and my lawyer instincts awaken. The next morning, I heard Jimmy on a phone call that stopped me cold. Uncle Tom? Yeah, the restructuring is going great. We're finally going to solve our age demographics problem. Some of these guys are just taking up space, you know? We need people who understand that technology moves fast. Age demographics problem, taking up space. At 53, I quietly activated the voice recording app on my phone and walked closer to his office. The Martinez situation is perfect, Jimmy continued. He's been resistant to every innovation we've proposed. Classic case of someone who can't adapt to change. HR's already building the documentation. The Martinez situation. They weren't just planning to fire me. They were creating a paper trail to justify age discrimination. I stopped recording and walked back to my desk, my hands shaking with rage and something else, determination. That evening, I called Emma. Dad, you sound weird. What's wrong? Emma, I want you to remember something important. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Okay, that's kind of random. Are you having a midlife crisis or something? Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally having a midlife awakening. The next morning brought my formal termination meeting. Jimmy had HR present, along with Mr. Peterson, who looked distinctly uncomfortable with the proceedings. Robert, Jimmy began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. We've decided to restructure the technical team to better align with our future vision. I see, I said quietly. And that vision doesn't include me? Look, you're a smart guy. You've had a good run here, but we need fresh energy, not tired old farts like you. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Mr. Peterson actually winced. We need people who understand social media, mobile integration, cloud computing, people who can move fast and break things. You're from a different era, Robert. I sat perfectly still, letting the ageist slurs wash over me while my phone recorded every word. I understand, I said finally. You need fresh blood. Exactly. Nothing personal, you know. It's just business. Maybe it's time to enjoy retirement. Golf, fishing, whatever old guys do. Well, have you ever wanted to watch someone's smugness crumble in real time? The question echoed in my mind as I nodded thoughtfully. Jimmy, I hope your modernization strategy works out. Really, I do. Something in my tone made him pause, but he pressed on. Great. So we'll need your company equipment returned and your access credentials transferred. Security will escort you out. Just procedure, nothing personal. Of course. Just one quick question about the transition timeline. Sure, what? When you implement the new authentication module, have you considered the implications of removing the two-factor verification protocols I built into the original system? Jimmy's face went blank. The what protocols? The ones that prevent unauthorized access during credential transfers. When you remove those safeguards to speed up your mobile integration, you'll be creating an open pathway for anyone with basic SQL injection knowledge to access the entire client database. That's not possible. I tested the code myself. Did you test it against the 17 different attack vectors I documented in the security manual? The one I wrote after consulting with federal cybersecurity experts? Silence. Because if you didn't, you're about to expose 43 Fortune 500 companies to the largest data breach in financial services history. Mr. Peterson leaned forward. Robert, are you saying? I'm saying that Jimmy's innovative approach to mobile-first design accidentally removes every security checkpoint that keeps us compliant with federal banking regulations. Jimmy's face had gone pale. You're just trying to scare us. Trying to make yourself seem indispensable. Maybe. Or maybe I'm trying to keep all of us out of federal prison. I stood up slowly, gathering the few personal items from my desk. You know, Jimmy, you're right about one thing. Technology does move fast, but so does federal law enforcement when someone compromises banking data. I walked toward the exit, then paused at the conference room door. Oh, and Jimmy? When the FDIC investigators start asking questions about who authorized the removal of mandatory security protocols, you might want to have better documentation than the old guy was resistant to change. The security guard was waiting to escort me out, but I barely noticed. My phone was still recording, and my mind was already 3 steps ahead. They wanted fresh blood. They were about to get a legal bloodbath instead. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized but never called. Morrison & Associates Employment Law. How can I help you? Hi, this is Robert Martinez. I'd like to schedule a consultation about age discrimination in the workplace. Of course, Mr. Martinez. When would be convenient? How about right now? The article appeared in TechCrunch on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after my termination. The age discrimination crisis, hiding in plain sight. How one tech company's modernization exposed systematic bias. I was having coffee with Sarah when my phone started buzzing with notifications. The reporter had done her homework. Interviews with employment lawyers, statistics from the EEOC, and a detailed case study of Peterson Technologies' recent restructuring efforts. Industry sources report that several experienced employees, over 50, have been systematically excluded from strategic planning sessions and subsequently terminated for resistance to innovation, the article read. This pattern suggests a deliberate effort to circumvent age discrimination protections through creative performance management. Sarah looked up from her own phone. Robert, there's already 300 comments on this article. What are people saying? Everything from finally someone's talking about this to detailed stories about their own experiences. Honey, you've opened a floodgate. By noon, my phone was ringing constantly. Former colleagues, reporters, lawyers, and strangers who'd read the article and wanted to share their own stories. But the call that surprised me most came from an unlisted number. Mr. Martinez, this is David Chen from Meridian Financial Systems. I think we need to talk. Meridian was Peterson's biggest competitor, and David Chen was their chief technology officer. I'd met him at industry conferences over the years. A brilliant engineer who'd built his reputation on bulletproof security architecture. David, what can I do for you? Actually, it's what I can do for you. We've been following the Peterson situation with great interest, particularly the part about their new authentication system. Oh? Robert, we handle security audits for 3 of Peterson's biggest clients. Last week, those clients started asking pointed questions about data protection standards and regulatory compliance. They're nervous. I sat down slowly. Nervous about what? About trusting their financial data to a company that just fired its chief security architect and replaced him with someone whose resume lists social media strategy as a core competency. The implications hit me immediately. In the financial services world, client confidence was everything. If major clients started questioning Peterson's security capabilities. David, are you offering me a job? I'm offering you the chance to do what you do best, with people who actually understand what you've built, plus a 20% raise and equity options. Before I could respond, he continued, and Robert, we don't believe experience has an expiration date. We think it gets better with age. That afternoon, I drove to Emma's college for an impromptu visit. I found her in the engineering library, surrounded by textbooks and looking remarkably like her mother when she concentrated. Dad, what are you doing here? Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Mija. Better than fine, actually. I wanted to tell you something important. We walked to a quiet corner of the campus quad, where I explained everything. The discrimination, the legal case, the job offer. Dad, that's amazing, but are you sure you want to start over somewhere new? Emma, do you know what I've learned in the past month? What? That starting over isn't about age. It's about courage. And sometimes the best way to prove you're not too old is to show everyone how much you still have to give. She hugged me tight. I'm proud of you, Dad. Not because you got a new job, but because you didn't let them make you believe you weren't worth fighting for. Where did you get so wise? From watching my dad never give up on things that matter. Meanwhile, Peterson Technologies was learning that modern problems require experienced solutions. The system failures started small, authentication timeouts that logged users out randomly, mobile app crashes during high-traffic periods, backup procedures that failed during routine maintenance. Jimmy's response was predictably millennial. We'll iterate through these bugs quickly. That's what agile development is all about. But clients weren't interested in being beta testers for a banking platform. When Southeastern Trust's mobile app went down during a busy Friday afternoon, exposing transaction data to anyone with basic network monitoring tools, the phone calls started. Tom Peterson's office. This is Margaret. Margaret, this is Bill Harrison from Southeastern Trust. I need to speak with Tom immediately. He's in a meeting with... I don't care if he's meeting with the Pope. Our legal team is preparing a breach notification letter that mentions Peterson Technologies by name. Get him on the phone now. Mr. Peterson found himself in crisis management mode, fielding calls from panicked clients while trying to understand how a routine software update had created a security nightmare. Jimmy's explanation was a masterpiece of deflection. Uncle Tom, this is just growing pains. Every tech company goes through this when they modernize legacy systems. We'll have it fixed by Monday. Jimmy, it's Thursday. Southeastern Trust processes $2 million in transactions every hour. They can't wait until Monday. Then we'll bring in some contractors to help patch things up. What contractors? Robert was our security expert. You fired him, remember? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Well, Jimmy said finally, maybe we can reach out to him. You know, as a consultant. I'm sure he'd be willing to help for the right price. Mr. Peterson stared at his nephew. You want to hire back the man you called a tired old fart? The one you said couldn't adapt to modern technology. It's just temporary, until we get our feet under us. But I was already gone, 3 weeks into my new position at Meridian Financial Systems, where my first project was conducting security audits for companies worried about their current provider's stability. The irony wasn't lost on me when David Chen handed me the Peterson Technologies assessment request. One of their biggest clients wants an independent evaluation of their current security infrastructure, David explained. They specifically requested you for the audit. I looked at the client name, Southeastern Trust. They know I used to work at Peterson? Robert, they know you built the systems that protected them for 15 years. Now they want to know if those protections are still in place. The audit took 2 days. What I found was worse than I'd feared. Jimmy hadn't just removed security protocols. He'd fundamentally misunderstood how they worked. The authentication system was riddled with vulnerabilities. The backup procedures were incomplete, and the compliance documentation was months out of date. My report was clinical and professional. Critical security deficiencies requiring immediate remediation to maintain regulatory compliance and client data protection. But the implications were devastating. Peterson Technologies was one failed audit away from losing their largest clients. The phone call I'd been expecting came on a Friday evening. Robert, it's Tom Peterson. Hello, Tom. I need to see you. Can you come in Monday morning? Tom, I don't work for you anymore, remember? Please, just hear me out. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory, where he couldn't ambush me with HR representatives and termination paperwork. He looked older than I remembered, gray at the temples and worry lines around his eyes. The man who'd built Peterson Technologies from a 12-person startup into an industry leader was clearly feeling the weight of watching it crumble. Robert, I owe you an apology. For what specifically? Firing me without cause? Letting your nephew destroy 15 years of my work? Or calling me a tired old fart? He winced. All of it, but mostly for forgetting that loyalty should flow both ways. Tom, where was this revelation 3 weeks ago? I was trying to give Jimmy a chance. He's family, and I thought maybe fresh perspective was what we needed. Fresh perspective or fresh blood to replace tired old farts. He never should have said that. I never should have let him say that. I studied his face, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus damage control. What do you want, Tom? I want you to come back. Senior Vice President of Technology, 50% raise. Full authority over all technical decisions. Jimmy reports to you, not the other way around. The offer was tempting. Vindication, financial security, and the chance to fix what had been broken. But something held me back. Tom, do you know what I've learned in the past month? What? That respect can't be bought back with a title and a raise. It has to be earned every day, through actions, not words. So that's a no. That's a too little, too late. I've found something better than coming back. I've found moving forward. His shoulders sagged. What about Jimmy? He's made mistakes, but he's young. He can learn. Tom, your nephew didn't make mistakes. He made choices. There's a difference. Robert, please. The company is hemorrhaging clients. The board is asking questions I can't answer. I need someone who understands what we built. You had someone who understood. You fired him because he was too old to be relevant. I stood to leave, then paused. Then, Tom, I hope you figure this out. I really do. But I'm not your solution anymore. I'm building something new. 2 days later, the story broke wide open. An investigative reporter had obtained internal Peterson emails discussing age demographics optimization and legacy employee transition strategies. The language was damning, clear evidence of systematic age discrimination disguised as performance management. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission announced a formal investigation. The Department of Labor opened a compliance review. And 3 more employees over 50 came forward with their own stories of discrimination. Jimmy's response was predictably tone-deaf, a company-wide email about misunderstandings and taken out of context communications. But the damage was done. Peterson Technologies stock dropped 15% in 2 days. Sarah found me in the kitchen that morning, reading the news coverage on my tablet. How do you feel about all this? She asked. Honestly, sad. I spent 25 years building something I was proud of. Watching it fall apart isn't satisfying. It's heartbreaking. But I'm not responsible for fixing other people's mistakes anymore. Jimmy made his choices. Tom made his. Now they get to live with the consequences. And you. I get to build something new, something better. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Dad saw the news. Are you okay? I typed back, better than okay, learning that sometimes losing everything is the first step to gaining what you really need, which is self-respect. The federal investigation moved quickly. EEOC interviews with current and former employees revealed a pattern of age-based discrimination that went beyond individual incidents. Performance reviews that suddenly became negative after employees turned 50. Strategic meetings where older workers were systematically excluded. Termination decisions that disproportionately affected experienced employees. Jimmy found himself in the uncomfortable position of explaining his fresh energy comments to federal investigators who specialized in employment discrimination. His MBA didn't prepare him for questions about statistical disparities in termination patterns or the legal definition of hostile work environment. The company's legal team scrambled to contain the damage, but the evidence was overwhelming. Internal emails, recorded phone conversations, documented patterns of discriminatory behavior. It painted a picture of systematic bias that no amount of corporate spin could obscure. Meanwhile, Peterson's client base continued to erode. When Meridian Financial Systems won the security audit contract for 3 major Peterson clients, I found myself protecting the same data I'd originally designed systems to secure, just from a different company with better values. The poetic justice wasn't lost on me, but it came with complicated emotions. These weren't abstract victories in a corporate chess game. They were real people's livelihoods, real relationships built over decades of trust. But sometimes principles matter more than comfort. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after my termination. Mr. Peterson himself, not his assistant. "Robert, the board is meeting tomorrow. Jimmy's being asked to step down." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you? Really?" I considered the question seriously. "Tom, I'm sorry that a young man destroyed his career through arrogance and poor judgment. I'm sorry that you're watching something you built get torn apart. But I'm not sorry that actions have consequences. The board wants to offer you Jimmy's position, CEO track, full equity package, complete authority to rebuild our technical infrastructure." The offer was staggering, more money than I'd ever imagined. The chance to run the company I'd helped build, complete vindication for everything I'd endured. "And Jimmy would report to you if you want to keep him." "Tom, do you understand why I can't take that offer? Because you don't trust us? Because I don't need you anymore." 3 months ago, I would have said yes immediately. I would have jumped at the chance to prove I wasn't too old, too slow, too set in my ways. But you know what I've learned? What? I don't need to prove anything to people who couldn't see my value when they had it. The silence stretched for a long moment. "Robert, what if I told you the company might not survive this?" "Then I'd say, that's the choice you made when you decided experience was a liability instead of an asset." After I hung up, I sat in my new office at Meridian, looking out at the city skyline. Sarah was right. This view was better than my old one, not because the building was taller, but because I'd earned it on merit, not sympathy. My phone rang again. This time, it was Emma. "Dad, I just heard from Mom about the job offer. Are you crazy for turning it down?" "Maybe. What do you think?" "I think you're showing me what integrity looks like, even when it costs something." Smart kid. I learned from a smart dad. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah?" "Remember when you taught me to ride a bike? You said the hardest part wasn't learning to balance. It was learning to let go of the fence." "I remember. I think you finally let go of the fence." 3 months later, Peterson Technologies settled the federal discrimination lawsuit for an undisclosed amount. Jimmy Peterson Jr. resigned to pursue other opportunities. Corporate speak for being quietly pushed out before criminal charges could be filed. The company survived, barely, under new leadership that implemented comprehensive age inclusion policies and mandatory bias training. Mr. Satimester, Peterson stepped down as chairman, selling his majority stake to a private equity firm that specialized in turnaround situations. I followed the news from my corner office at Meridian, where I was building something I'd never had before, a company culture that valued both innovation and experience, where fresh ideas complemented institutional knowledge instead of replacing it. The mentorship program I developed paired senior engineers with recent graduates, creating teams that combined energy with wisdom. Our client retention rate was 97%, and our employee satisfaction surveys showed the highest marks in the industry. But the real victory came on a Saturday morning when Emma called from college. "Dad, guess what happened in my cybersecurity class yesterday?" "What?" Professor Williams used the Peterson case study as an example of how not to manage human resources in tech companies. He specifically mentioned how they fired their most experienced security architect right before implementing major system changes. That must have been awkward. Actually, it was awesome. I raised my hand and said, "That architect was my dad, and he's doing just fine without them." "Emma, you didn't have to." "Dad, you spent my whole childhood teaching me to stand up for what's right. Did you think I wasn't paying attention?" That afternoon, I drove to my mother's house for our weekly visit. At 83, she was still sharp enough to cut through my rationalizations and wise enough to celebrate the right victories. "Mijo, you look happy," she said, settling into her favorite chair with a cup of coffee. "I am happy, Mama. Really happy." "Because you got revenge on the people who hurt you?" "No, because I learned I don't need revenge when I have respect." "Your father would be proud," she said quietly. "He always said the measure of a man isn't how he handles success, but how he handles being underestimated." I miss him. He's here, Robert. In the way you didn't let them break your spirit. In the way you chose building over burning. That evening, Sarah and I took a walk through our neighborhood, something we hadn't done regularly in years. Without the constant pressure of proving myself at Peterson, I'd discovered time I'd forgotten I had. "Any regrets?" she asked, taking my hand as we passed the park where Emma used to play. "About what?" "Turning down Tom's offer. It was a lot of money." "Sarah, do you know what I realized during all this?" "What?" "I spent 25 years building other people's dreams because I thought that was the same as building my own. But it's not. And now I'm building something that reflects my values, not just my skills. Something Emma can be proud of when she tells her kids about her dad. What do you think she'll say?" "I hope she'll say he was a man who knew the difference between being valued and being valuable." We stopped at the corner where Emma used to wait for the school bus, back when my biggest worry was whether I'd be home in time for dinner. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said. "What?" "They thought they were getting rid of dead weight. Instead, they threw away the foundation and kept the decorations. That's a pretty good metaphor. I have my moments." A year later, I received an invitation that surprised me. The Technology Leadership Council was honoring me with their Distinguished Service Award for contributions to cybersecurity and ethical business practices. The ceremony was held at the same hotel where I'd attended industry conferences for 2 decades, representing Peterson Technologies with pride and enthusiasm. Now, I was representing Meridian, and more importantly, representing the principle that experience isn't a liability. It's an irreplaceable asset. In my acceptance speech, I looked out at an audience of technology leaders, many of whom I'd known for years. Age discrimination in tech isn't just morally wrong, I said. It's strategically stupid. When we discard experience in favor of energy, we lose the institutional knowledge that prevents us from repeating expensive mistakes. The applause was genuine, but the real victory came afterward when 3 younger engineers approached me separately to discuss age inclusion initiatives at their own companies. "Mr. Martinez," one of them said, "my dad is 58, and worried about being pushed out of his job. What advice would you give him? Document everything. Know your worth. And remember that the right company will value what you bring, not resent what you represent. And if you can't find the right company, then maybe it's time to help create one. 6 months later, I got the call I'd been half expecting. Robert, it's Tom Peterson. Hello, Tom. How are you? Honestly, learning some hard lessons about the value of experience. Oh? The new management team brought in consultants to analyze what went wrong. Want to know what they found? Tell me. That firing you was the single most damaging decision in the company's history, not just financially, but culturally. They said it sent a message that loyalty and expertise were liabilities. That's unfortunate. Robert, I know you won't come back. I know I don't deserve to have you come back. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost. Tom, I appreciate that. I really do. The consultants recommended we reach out to you, not for a job, but for advice. They said the best way to rebuild our culture might be to learn from the man whose dismissal broke it. I thought about it for a moment. Tom, I'll consider consulting with your new team, not because I need the work, but because I believe in second chances for people who genuinely learn from their mistakes. And Jimmy? What about him? He's been asking about you. I think he finally understands what he threw away. Then maybe he's ready to start building something worth keeping. That night, I sat in Emma's old room, now converted to my home office, working on a presentation about age-inclusive hiring practices. The walls were covered with photos from her graduation, her first day of college, her internship at a Silicon Valley startup where she was already making a name for herself. Sarah found me there, as she often did during my late-night work sessions. Still fighting the good fight? She asked. Someone has to. Besides, it's not really fighting anymore. It's building. Building what? A world where my daughter never has to choose between having a career and having a life, where experience is valued alongside innovation, where people like me don't have to prove they're not too old to contribute. Think you'll succeed? I think I already have. The question now is how much bigger I can make the success. Emma called as I was finishing the presentation. Dad, I have news. Good news, I hope. The best. I just accepted a full-time offer from my internship company. And Dad? They specifically mentioned wanting people who understand both cutting-edge technology and time-tested principles. They said that combination is rare in our industry. Congratulations, Mija. I'm proud of you. Dad, can I tell you something? Always. Watching you handle what happened at Peterson taught me more about leadership than any business class ever could. You showed me that how you lose says more about your character than how you win. Where did you learn to be so wise? From a dad who never stopped teaching, even when he thought no one was listening. After we hung up, I walked out to the backyard where Sarah was tending her garden, another hobby we'd rediscovered once I stopped working 80-hour weeks. Emma got the job, I told her. Of course she did. She's brilliant. She said something that made me think. What? That watching me handle losing my job taught her about leadership. Sarah stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. You know what I think? What? I think you didn't lose your job. You lost your chains. That's very philosophical for a Tuesday night. I have my moments. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where we'd raised our daughter and built our life. Tomorrow, I'd go back to building security systems and mentoring young engineers and proving that age is just a number when it comes to relevant contributions. But tonight, I was just a man who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge is letting people destroy themselves while you build something better. My phone buzzed with one final text of the day from Emma. Dad, I forgot to tell you. My new boss mentioned the Peterson case study during my interview. He said it was a perfect example of how not to manage talent. Then he said he was glad they were too stupid to keep you, because now better companies get to benefit from your experience. I showed the text to Sarah, who smiled and shook her head. You know what the real irony is, she said. What? They called you a tired old fart? Now you're more energetic and motivated than you've been in years. Funny how that works. Almost like age and energy aren't opposites. Almost like experience and innovation aren't mutually exclusive. Almost like they were wrong about everything. Almost. We walked back inside, and I closed my laptop for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that the best years don't have to be behind you, just because some of them are. But tonight, I was content to be exactly what Jimmy Peterson thought was obsolete. A man who knew his worth and wasn't afraid to prove it. They wanted fresh blood. Instead, they got a lesson in the value of aged wisdom. And honestly, that felt like a pretty good trade.